This episode of the History Guy is brought to you by Incogni. Take your personal data off the market.
Shopping via the mail isn't exactly new. Mail order catalogs have been around at least since the 19th century, but e-commerce has certainly changed the game. How could those of us who grew up in the pre-Amazon age, whose Christmas toys had to be ordered from a Sears catalog, or who had to wait weeks to get those often disappointing toys that you ordered out of the back of comic books, possibly have predicted the e-commerce era? But on the other hand, would the e-commerce era even be possible were it not for a few inventions of my generation? Because before we could embrace e-commerce, we needed protective packaging. Let me show you something. This is my monthly privacy report from Incogni.
Incogni is a tool that tracks down the information brokers that collect and sell your private information. Now, you have a right to have this information taken down, but how do you find them? How do you enforce that right? Well, Incogni does that for you. Look, even more than a year and a half after signing up, Incogni is still identifying new places where my data is being stored and getting it taken down. In just the last 4 weeks, they had my data taken off of 25 more sites, saving me a whopping 18 hours of work if I did that myself.
Thank you, Incogni, for sponsoring this episode of The History Guy. That's right, these shady data pirates, they collect personal information, your name, your address, your email, your shopping habits, maybe your work history, even your social security number, often taken from those all too common data breaches. They sell that information and it can lead to everything from those annoying spam emails and pop-ups to identity theft. Keep your private information private. Protect yourself from data pirates. Go to incogni.com/thehistoryguy and use the code thehistoryguy for an exclusive offer of 60% off an annual plan. That's incogni.com/thehistoryguy using the code thehistoryguy, or you can use the link in the description. You'll be glad you did.
Marketing firm Maple explains that the first e-commerce company was Boston Computer Exchange, an online marketplace for people interested in selling their used computers, launched in 1982. From these humble beginnings have grown massive e-commerce businesses that ironically played a role in the demise of the Sears catalog in 1993. The Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis figures that e-commerce sales as a percentage of total retail sales has increased steadily from 0.6% in 1999 to 16.4% in the fourth quarter of 2024. The market research firm Statista estimates that e-commerce sales will exceed $4.3 trillion worldwide in 2025. The e-commerce statistics site Yagara estimates that as of 2023, there are 274.7 million online buyers in the United States, and worldwide there are 2.64 billion online shoppers. E-commerce has even spawned its own set of holidays. Yagara writes that 93% of millennials always plan to purchase products from Black Friday or Cyber Monday sales. All of these online sales result in a mind-boggling number of packages. Amazon reports that they processed 11,147 U.S. delivery orders per minute and delivered some 5.8 billion packages in 2023. And the e-commerce market in China is around 3 times the size of the U.S. market. The numbers are indeed mind-boggling, and all this e-commerce, translated into cardboard boxes, requires an enormous amount of infrastructure. Amazon alone operates more than 80,000 vehicles and a fleet of more than 100 aircraft. But these volumes of packages might not be possible were it not for 2 earlier and underappreciated inventions. David Porter of the Associated Press wrote in 2010 that a New York City designer approached Marquet Chavan, a Swiss chemical engineer, and mechanical engineer Alfred W. Fielding in the 1950s with a proposal for creating textured wallpaper. Packaging company MaxPack writes that the two believe that if we used paper backing in developing plastic wallpapers, it would increase the durability of wallpapers up to several times. They felt that paper backing would make it easier for individuals to stick the wallpaper onto the walls without hassle. David Kindy explained in Smithsonian Magazine in 2019, they were trying to create a wallpaper that would appeal to the burgeoning Beat generation. Journalist H.W. Fielding explained on his website in 2018, working out of a small garage across the street from the Fielding Machine Company in Hawthorne, New Jersey, they started by trapping air between 2 shower curtains. The material was not practical as wallpaper, but in creating it, they developed a method to vacuum form a pattern of air bubbles between 2 sealed sheets of treated plastic, using machines Fielding developed. While they were disappointed with the wallpaper, Kindy writes that, however, the inventors did not totally dismiss their failure. They were granted the first of several patents for the process and equipment of embossing and laminating materials, then started thinking of uses. More than 400, in fact. Eventually, the two would earn 6 patents pertaining to the process and equipment needed to emboss the air-filled plastic. The marketing magazine Retail Brew writes that Fielding and Siobhan formed Sealed Air Corporation in 1960, and job number one was to figure out how to market the product, which they called Air Cap. Their next try was as insulation for greenhouses, an idea that Kindy writes ultimately was about as successful as textured wallpaper. The product was actually tested in greenhouses, but it proved ineffective. Retail Brew quips. Like any entrepreneurs, they were trying to think outside the box, but it turned out that the best place for their invention was inside of it. Fielding writes that, however, on a bumpy flight into Newark Airport one day, they hit upon the ultimate use for their product, protecting fragile items during shipping. It isn't clear if the cloud story is actually true, but it is true that the product would, Fielding explains, invent an entirely new industry, protective packaging. Until then, products were shipped mostly in sawdust or discarded or shredded newspaper, paper wadding, and other dusty, abrasive, and often inky paper products. Kindy remarks it was messy since ink from the old newspapers often rubbed off on the product and those handling it. Plus, it really didn't offer that much protection. Max Pack writes that it was Sealed Air's marketing guru, Frederick Bowers, who believed that air in between bubble wrap could potentially keep the product secure and in place. He thought that this effective and versatile packaging material could easily protect any product during storage and packaging. Although often used generically today, they trademarked the name for the product, bubble wrap. And they had come upon the idea just in time for another development. Retail Brew writes, in October 1959, IBM announced that it was introducing what would become one of the first popular commercial computers, the 1401 data processing system. IBM was looking for a way to ship all those computers, and Sealed Air's material was about to finally get its close-up. Chad Stevens, Vice President of Innovation and Development for Sealed Air's Product Care Division, told Smithsonian it was the answer to IBM's problems. They could ship their computers without damage. That opened up the door for a lot of other businesses to start using bubble wrap. Sealed Air's website writes in their company history, from the start, bubble wrap brand Original Cushioning was truly revolutionary, both as a product and as a value proposition. It could reduce total packaging cost by using less material, reduce packaging size and weight, and reduce loss from damage. Kindy writes that bubble wrap was a godsend to small packaging companies. The product evolved into different shapes, sizes, strengths, and thicknesses for expanded uses. Big and little bubbles, wide and short sheets, large and short rolls. Still, Kindy notes, the company wasn't turning a profit. That's when T.J. Dermot Dunphy became CEO in 1971. He helped build annual sales from $5 million in the first year to $3 billion in 2000 when he left the firm. Kindy quotes Dunphy. Mark Chauvin was a visionary and Al Fielding was a first-class engineer, says Dunphy, who at 86 years young still works every day at his private equity investment and management firm, Kildare Enterprises. But neither wanted to run the company. They just wanted to work on their inventions. Porter writes that Sealed Air's 100,000 square foot warehouse is an obsessive compulsive's dream with row upon row of stacked rolls of bubble wrap as big as 7 feet in diameter. The temperature is sweat-inducing, caused by the machines that process millions of granules of resin, one box is labeled Munchy resin, at temperatures of up to 560 degrees. Air is not injected into the bubbles, but it is trapped in them as the plastic passes over several rollers. Of course, this air is its own draw, Kindly writes. When a very young Howard Fielding carefully cradled his father's unusual invention, he had no idea that his next action would make him a trendsetter. In his hands was a plastic sheet with air-filled bumps across it. And as he fingered the funny-feeling film, he couldn't resist the temptation. He started popping the bubbles, just like much of the rest of the world has been doing ever since. Porter calls bubble wrap the stress reducer disguised as package cushioning. Mostly they like the sound it makes when they destroy it, piece by piece. This has led to a plethora of unintended uses. Porter writes, people have walked to the altar dressed in it, protected their garden plants with it, even put it on display at highbrow art museums. He notes that there are now more than 250 Facebook pages devoted to bubble wrap, which has, he writes, an inexplicable hold on pop culture. Emma Taubenfield listed several unexpected uses for bubble wrap in a 2024 edition of Reader's Digest, including covering your hanger bar with bubble wrap so that it doesn't leave a crease in your pants, and helping your shoes maintain their shape by stuffing them with bubble wrap. In 2013, Jamie and Adam from the television show Mythbusters found bubble wrap to be a useful survival tool in a challenge to cross Utah's Desolation Canyon with only a knife, duct tape, and bubble wrap as tools. They crafted ponchos and gloves from bubble wrap held together with duct tape. The bubble wrap was found to be effective at insulating them from the cold. However, in a 2012 episode, they busted the claim that a man could be covered in bubble wrap and thrown from a height of 35 feet and still survive. While the name bubble wrap is a trademark, other companies produce similar products under different names, and there's been innovation, including products that are biodegradable. So, how important is bubble wrap in an e commerce world? Packaging company SCI explains for businesses, ensuring products arrive in perfect condition isn't just about avoiding returns, it's about protecting customer trust and brand reputation. Enter bubble wrap, a packaging champion that has reduced shipping damages by 85%. This is because, as CA writes, the bubble wrap's design, air-filled bubbles encased in a plastic film, offers exceptional cushioning by absorbing shocks and vibrations during transit. Each bubble acts as a miniature air cushion, distributing force evenly across the surface and preventing localized impact damage. This makes it ideal for packing bubble wrap around the fragile items like glass bottles or sensitive electronics. Baywater Packaging and Supply explains, in the e-commerce era where online shopping and shipment of goods has skyrocketed, bubble wrap's importance has only increased. While online sources often quote a claim that 240,000 miles of bubble wrap are produced each year, enough to wrap around the Earth's equator 10 times, the exact source of this claim is difficult to pinpoint. But market research firm Precedence Research estimated that the 2025 market for bubble wrap type products is more than $3.33 billion. But bubble wrap isn't the only invention that helped to facilitate the e-commerce revolution. Smithsonian's Science History Institute writes that Dow Chemical invented styrofoam in 1941, rediscovering a process first patented by Swedish inventor Carl Munters. Dow bought the rights to Munter's method and began producing a lightweight, water-resistant, and buoyant material that seemed perfectly suited for building docks and watercraft and for insulating homes, offices, and chicken sheds. The website of Air Sea Containers explains the new material is quickly put to work on all kinds of purposes, from cups to coolers. But it wasn't until a few years later that styrofoam's potential for the shipping industry was realized. The New York Times wrote in 2014, in 1960, a research chemist named Maurice Laverne Zweigel packed a raw egg and a few handfuls of skinny, bendy polystyrene noodles into a small cardboard box, sealed the flaps, and tossed it off a third-floor roof. His invention worked. The egg was unscathed. The Times explains that the tubular shape was Zweigel's, a Dow chemist's, key discovery. Whereas plastic spheres would have slid around the fragile item and let it fall to the bottom, the noodles tangled together to form a secure nest. The new product was first marketed as polystyrene fill at a plastics exposition at the New York Coliseum in the summer of 1961. The Times writes that it was sold in 200-pound drums. The foam was meant to be a substitute for shredded paper, sawdust, ribbons of wood, and even popcorn. Polystyrene proved to be much lighter than these other options and less susceptible to moisture and verminous infestation. However, the noodles weren't exactly what we use today. It turned out, the Times writes, that the 5-inch tubes were tricky to produce and they could get caught up in factory hoppers. It was another man who came up with the shape with which we are more familiar today. Journalist Mark Zorn wrote in a 2014 edition of the media website Vision Launch. Robert E. Holden first filed for the patent in 1962. This patent was granted in 1965, and what is interesting about the description of the item is that it was also suggested as an insulation material as it offered good heat insulation. It's called an improvement over popcorn and shredded newspaper. Explaining that Holden was a prolific inventor who sold a number of his inventions and ideas to organizations over the years, Zorn writes that to facilitate the creation of the packing peanut, Holden also invented an apparatus that would help to cut and expand plastic members through a steaming process. By feeding plastic strips through the device, it would create the foamy cellular structure that is the trademark of the classic packing peanuts. It also allowed the plastic to be created in such a way that they would interlock, providing a more secure shipping solution. Unlike Chauvin and Fielding, who were inducted into the New Jersey Inventors Hall of Fame in 1993, Air Sea Containers writes that Robert Holden never achieved any real fame, but his invention changed the world of consumer goods. Dow Chemical put packing peanuts into production in 1965, and the packaging material caught on almost immediately. Before long, businesses were using these versatile and inexpensive void-fill materials to ship just about everything. Like bubble wrap, people have developed numerous uses for the foam faux legumes. Home guru Bob Villa suggests using them as insulation to keep drinks cold. Just put your cold drinks in a tub full of polystyrene peanuts and let them serve as insulation. And preventing scuffs on walls. Slice a packaging peanut in half with a sharp knife and glue the flat edge to the back of framed mirrors and artwork you hang around the house. The little bit of cushioning will protect your walls from scuffs and scrapes. The online magazine For Women First suggests blocking household drafts by filling a clean tube sock with packing peanuts. Then tie or sew the sock closed and place it in spots where you feel a breeze. The magazine also writes that they can be used as an air freshener. Place several packing peanuts in a bowl and add 5 to 10 drops of your favorite essential oil. Tuck the bowl away in the medicine cabinet or behind the toilet. The porous peanuts will absorb the oil and slowly release the aroma. You can also use them as toe separators for do-it-at-home pedicures. The ever-helpful Pinterest has entire pages dedicated to packaging peanuts, arts, and crafts. Like bubble wrap, foam peanuts raise environmental concerns, and technologies have innovated around that, including plant-based alternatives that are biodegradable, and Science Alert writes. And now researchers at Purdue University in the US have figured out how to recycle the tons and tons and tons of peanuts that have ended up in the waste pile. They're turning them into super effective battery components. The team has discovered that by heating the peanuts to between 500 and 900 degrees Celsius, they can produce super slim carbon nanoparticle sheets, which can be used to make the perfect anode. And when we say perfect, we mean better than what's currently on the market. How important are packaging peanuts to e-commerce? The peanuts are inexpensive, easily available, and fill in the spaces around awkwardly shaped items. First Packaging Systems explains that they are also extremely lightweight. At 99% air, you can put as many as you need into your boxes without adding any measurable shipping weight. This may reduce your freight cost or shipping cost if you use a third-party delivery service to get your product directly to the consumer, such as an e-commerce business. Robert Meisner, head of the packaging program at the University of Wisconsin at Stout, told the New York Times, "For cushioning, nothing works as well as the foams, and they're cheap to produce. Cut the polystyrene in half and look at it under the microscope. It's mostly air. They are selling air." A 2015 edition of the website Science Alert writes that about 1.5 million tons of these expandable polystyrene padding materials are produced each year worldwide.
The term bubble wrap generation is often used derisively to refer to you coddled brats who, unlike us, never had to wait 6 weeks in order to get a very disappointing box of 100 soldiers that we ordered for $1.25 out of the back of Boy's Life magazine. But even we boomers and Gen Xers who had to walk uphill in a blizzard both ways to get to school are really now part of the bubble wrap generation because, face it, most of us are paying for Amazon Prime, so we get that free overnight delivery. Overnight deliveries that might not be possible if the things in those packages weren't protected, wrapped in bubble wrap or buried in polystyrene peanuts. The world often turns on such overlooked inventions, more than we often realize. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode of The History Guy, and if you did, please feel free to like and subscribe and share The History Guy with your friends. And if you also believe that history deserves to be remembered, then you can support The History Guy as a member on YouTube, a supporter on our community at Locals, or as a patron on Patreon. You can also check out our great merchandise shop or book a special message from The History Guy on Cameo.